Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third installment of the ConsoliDator MasterClass. So I have a couple surprises for you today. Number one is we got the webcam to work in a way, and so you'll actually be able to see my demo unit working. And the second surprise I have for you is today we're going to take a look at some gas detection applications and how the ConsoliDator Plus can be used for that. But we're also going to take a look at some other things that, because of the feedback I had received after previous sessions, some folks wanted to take a look at the model numbers and how they're made, and other people wanted to look at pricing. So I figured I would take some time today, and we're going to look at some application stuff, and then we're going to take a look at more of the model number breakdowns and an overview of pricing. So as a reminder to everyone, you're all on mute. You can please feel free to ask any questions you want in the chat box on the left-hand side of the screen, and I'll answer them as we go, and also afterwards where I say on past 4:30 to ask or to answer any questions people have or anything like that. So again, you're more than welcome to leave at 4:30 and not stay for the Q&A portion of it, but we usually get some good stuff out of it. So without further ado, we're going to go to our first slide, which just happens to be a poll, because you know how much I love polls. So the first question I want to know is, do you sell gas detection equipment? I'm genuinely curious. I'm assuming there's a lot of folks out there that do, but you never know. And so far, it's looking like a majority of people say yes, which is good. And none of you thought that it was none of my business, so I appreciate that. Alrighty, so the first screen we're going to take a look at is, well, it's labeled gas detection screen, because again, we can label the screens anything we want to, right? And so what are we taking a look at? We're looking at the LEL of methane. I try to get the numbers to match with realistic figures out in the real world, so forgive me if they're a little off, but they should be right around where they are. So what we're taking a look at is we have a bar graph over here on the left side of the screen, and that's just obviously measuring the LEL. Then we also have this little marker here, and that is where we get an alarm. But we already know all of this because you've sat through 2 of these classes. So that was more of just a little review. Really what I want you to focus on is the fact that we have this channel here that has this room condition, and it says safe. You know how I am. I love to have as many words on the screen as possible. I think it's intuitive, and I think it's a pretty clever thing to do. So in this case, where our LEL is around 2%, the room is safe. Now the third channel I have down here is sensor output, and it's reading 6.1 milliamps on this screen. Now, the reason why I have this on here is because I want to demonstrate another feature for you, and I'm going to do that right now once I share my webcam. So here we go. For the first time ever, I'm going to show you my webcam. I'm just going to give it a few seconds to make sure that it goes through. Alrighty, so you should all be seeing my ConsoliDator Plus demo that I have right here on the table next to me. And so as the level of gas goes up, you'll notice that the bar graph goes up and we get to this A1 marker. Now what happens when we get to the A1 marker? Well, everything starts flashing at us and it turns red. But the room condition turns from safe to run with a bunch of exclamation marks just to get the point across. And again, to get the point across that, hey, we can make that say anything we want. It's fully customizable. And even our sensor output is flashing red. Now, the reason why I have the sensor output on there in the first place is because let's just say, for example, that we get an alarm. So I'm going to tell you what I'm doing in a second. All right, so now we have an alarm, and the consolidator here is telling us to run. But you'll notice our sensor output is just fine. At 5.8 milliamps, we're going to be anywhere near this level, right? And so the reason why I put the sensor output on there is to show you that, first of all, we can turn a physical input into a channel that's viewable on the screen, but also to show that it's just a way to make sure that your alarms are accurate, that they're actually working. Now, the feature that I used for this is called the simulate feature. So basically, even though my 4 to 20 milliamp signal is only 5.8, I can change this channel reading here, this methane LEL, to be whatever I want within my scale, and I can do that by pressing this up and down button. Or let's say I wanted to just type in a number. I can just go in here, and we can just type in anything we want, again, within our scale. So when I do that, it just goes to 14 automatically. And all I have to do is, to go back to the actual reading, all I have to do is just press real. And it goes back to where it should be. And so now we're going to go back to the slides. And so the slides are basically just going over what we just saw. So when you receive these after the class, you'll know what they are. So the second slide was just that, just explaining that whole screen and what happens. And again, just for sake of simplicity, the sensor output is on the screen just as a redundant thing to look at. So if you get an alarm and the output of the sensor doesn't really make sense, then you know there might be something off, something to go check out. And with that, we have our second poll. Now this one's really important. I really need to know the answer to this. There is only one correct answer, but we'll see what other people come up with. So which of the following is the greatest rock song ever recorded? Now, I think recorded is actually the key word there, because I'm sure there's plenty of rock songs that were never recorded, especially blues songs. They're never properly recorded, but. All right, well, it looks like a lot of you are choosing Burning Down the House, which is the correct answer in my book. And that just made the answer jump even more. All right, and for those of you who do not know the song Burning Down the House by the Talking Heads, you have to go listen to that song. I promise you'll love it. So, Talking Heads by a mile. All righty, so the second screen we're actually going to take a look at is, I'm calling it the common alarm screen. And so the reason why I made this is because when I was quoting one of these out for someone that was in gas detection, and they had asked me if it had common relays, and I didn't know exactly what that meant. So I looked into it. And so basically what we're allowed to do on the ConsoliDator Plus is, rather than having just one channel being tied to an alarm, I can actually have multiple channels on one alarm and on one relay. So on this screen that we're looking at here, we're reading 4 different gases, or 4 different channels, right? No matter which one of those goes into alarm, we're going to have that propane alarm thing there to say on, okay? So we're going to take a look at what that looks like here, right? So we have that channel number 1 that went into an alarm, so our propane alarm is on. So I'm going to go ahead and share my webcam again for the second time ever, and I'm just going to show you exactly what that looks like on a demo unit. So right now everything's good, everything's green. So our propane alarm right down here is off. But if my channel 1 creeps up above that set point, our alarm turns on. And then you can obviously see which channel is causing that alarm, right? And then if my level goes down, the alarm goes away. So I'm going to show you again. I'm going to use the simulate feature once again to show you, just to prove this point here. So I'm going to press the simulate. I'm going to press the up button to go all the way up. Okay, so now we're in alarm. So now you'll see our propane alarm is on, even though it's channel 2 that's causing the alarm. So I'm only showing you 2 channels with one alarm, but you can combine multiple channels or multiple alarm points into one. So what I did was I used an OR alarm. So I told the consolidator, if this or that gets to a certain threshold, I want this alarm to turn on. And now that alarm could be physically tied to a relay. And so that way you have multiple gas detectors actually hooked up to a single relay. And so that was the point of this screen right here. And that was one of the reasons why I thought this product would be really great for this type of application. And again, the slide deck is just a way to verbalize this so that when you look at it after, you'll see what's going on. The original intention was actually to have the PowerPoint slide and the webcam at the same time, but that's just not how it worked out for me. So, and we're going to move on to our last poll. And it's a pretty easy one. Are you still with me? That was the quickest response I've seen yet. All right. All righty. So this last screen is actually going to be really, really cool. I like it. All right. So this next screen here, we're taking a look at a full plant overview. Well, what do I mean by that? So for this example, let's just assume that you have a customer that took their plant and they designate or they cut it into 4 zones that they like to look at, right? Each zone has, let's say, 4 or 5 gas detectors or however many they want in there. When everything is okay, everything is safe, everything is green. But using our common alarm feature that we just looked at, I can actually have that alarm trigger on this screen as well. And so what that will look like when the alarm gets triggered is it goes to this warning screen. And so I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like with the webcam. And so you see that we have the 4 zones. Everything is safe. But now all of a sudden we get an alarm in zone 1. And so now an operator looking at this particular screen can say, okay, there's something wrong with zone 1. I need to go take a look at it. Now, there's a couple different things we could do here. We could use these arrow keys to search around the different screens and take a look, right? That's how we can figure out which alarm we have going off. Or we could press this alert button. Remember the alert screen? That's going to tell us all of the alarms that are active. And so right now I have 4 alarms. That's just because it's a demo. In real life, you might only have 1. But again, we can use this screen to take a look at which alarms are active. Or I actually programmed one of these soft keys down here to skip to a certain screen, okay? So I have 4 zones on here, and I have 4 function keys I can program. So I can make F1, this function key, I can make that go to the zone 1 screen. I can make the F2 go to the screen that's showing zone 2, so on and so forth. For this demo, we're just going to take a look at what's going on at zone 1. So from this screen, I know there's a problem here. I can press this button. It jumps to the screen that's causing the alarm. And now all of a sudden I can know, okay, it's channel number 1. That's what's causing me problems. But just to show you again, so here's our common alarm screen. Everything is good. Everything is still good. Well, what happens if it's channel 2 that goes into alarm? Same thing. We still get that zone 1 warning. So regardless of which channel it is that goes into an alarm, we get that warning. And so that's another reason why I thought this would be an interesting application for the consolidator, because we can actually do an entire plant overview with just 1 screen. That way you're not surfing through a bunch of different screens with all these bar graphs on them. So I thought that was pretty cool. And so with that, our last couple slides, we're not going to use the webcam because we are actually going to take a look at some part numbers and prices. And so we're going to do that right now. Now, the first thing we're going to take a look at is what an actual Consolidator Plus part number looks like. So this is a typical part number. This is about as long as they get. It could be a few characters longer. Some of them are shorter, but this is your average Consolidator Plus part number. And so what we're looking at is every single consolidator is going to start off with a PD9000. That's just because it's the PD9000 series. And the PD obviously stands for Precision Digital, or if you're calling it for price and delivery, call David. And the 9000, again, is just the series. Then we have this GP over here, this dash GP. And so that stands for General Purpose in regard to area classification. And I know all the questions that are coming because of that statement. And the answer is yes, we are working on hazardous area approvals as well, but for now we just have the general purpose. The next thing we have are these numbers and letters. Now, these numbers and letters mean something, and they're always going to be in the exact same order, and I'm going to show you what that means in a second. So first of all, we're taking a look. We have 12 analog inputs, 10 analog outputs, AO, 10 relay outputs, that's what the RY is for, and then lastly, this unit has Ethernet capabilities. Now, there's one thing that's there's one thing that is missing from this part number. You know, when we went over the flow applications, I told you we could have pulse inputs, but I didn't mention anything about pulse inputs in this part number, and there's a reason for that, because this particular part number just doesn't have them. And so with our Consolidator Plus part numbers, if a unit doesn't have a feature or an input and an output, it's just omitted from the part number altogether. You know, we are never going to see a 0 RY if it doesn't have any relays. The entire thing is just going to be dropped from it completely. And so this particular part number that we were looking at, it has 12 analog inputs. And remember, each analog input comes with a 24-volt DC power supply. So you're not only just getting analog inputs, you're getting power supplies as well. You're getting 10 analog outputs. And again, each of those outputs has a power supply, 10 relay outputs, and Ethernet. Now, as it says on the bottom of the screen here, what if we only need Modbus inputs? We're going to use Modbus, so we don't need any analog inputs. What would our part number look like? Well, remember I said before, we don't have pulse inputs, we drop that from the part number. So in this one, if we're going to not have any analog inputs, we're just going to drop this 12AI completely out of it, and now that gives us this as our new model number. And again, if you didn't want Ethernet on the device, you would just drop the E and you'd get your new model number. So that's a very basic overview of how the model numbers are done, or how they're built. And so the study guide goes into a little bit more detail about it. So it basically goes, we have our pulse inputs first. So on this unit here, if I had 4 pulse inputs, I would put a dash 4PI before that 12AI. So it always goes pulse inputs, analog outputs, relays, and then Ethernet if it's there. So it's those 4 things is always in that same order. So knowing that, you can actually just you can build part numbers in your head. That's how I do it. When people ask me for a quote or anything like that, I just ask them how many inputs and outputs they need of each, and I build the part number in my head. That's literally how it's done. Or you can always go to the website and we have a configurator. But again, that's in the that is going to be in the study guide as well. So just as a little quiz that we just went over, which option is not included in the part number PD9000-GP-8PI-5AO-20RY-E? And everybody got it right. Well, some folks didn't. Some folks have answered RS-485, which is actually that's a great opportunity for me to mention. RS-485 is a standard feature on this device. So whether you're going to need to use it or not, it's always going to come on the device. So although it is not included in the part number, I can see why that would have thrown you off. It's not included in the part number simply because it's standard. It's the same thing with digital inputs, by the way. Digital inputs are standard features on the Consolidator Plus, so we don't put those in the model number at all. But a majority of you got to the answer correct, which was analog inputs. That's what's missing, or which input is missing from that part number. So awesome job. Lastly, we're going to take a look at some pricing. So the number one thing I can say is with the pricing, it's obviously easiest to visit the website and take a look at the configurator, or to call me and ask me. But really, this is how the pricing is broken down. You don't have to do this every time you quote it. I'm just showing this to you so you understand where the prices are coming from. So you'll take a look on the left side here. This is our base model consolidator. When I say base model, what I mean, and you can tell by looking at that part number, there are no inputs or outputs aside from the RS-485 and the digital inputs and outputs. Those included features always come with it. So base model with no I/O cards is $1,700 in US dollars. Then you need to add your inputs and outputs, okay? So we have our analog input cards, and those are $475 each. We have analog output cards that are $410. We have our pulse input cards that are $410 each. And then we have our relay output cards, which are $175 each. So if I were to have quoted you a PD 9000-GP-4AI-5AO, the price would be $2,585, simply because I take the base model, I add that to, I add the price of the auction cards to that, and I get my final price. It's really that simple. And if I wanted to add Ethernet, I add an E to the model number like we took a look at, and it's a $500 adder for that. But this, what you're looking at, that's the basics of it. That's how the pricing is done. So while I'm here, I also want to mention something that's pretty interesting. So when we take a look at quoting these out or pitching these to customers, one thing that's going to come up a lot is the pricing, right? They're going to say, oh, geez, the pricing on that, I could probably take a look at a PLC, or I could just look at panel meters, right? Panel meters are so much less expensive than this. Well, here's the reality, folks. So the customer's right. This is a lot more money than a couple panel meters. I'm not going to disagree with them on that, okay? But after they make that initial investment, if they need to add more tanks to their site, or they just need more analog inputs, well, they buy an analog input card for $475, and that means they get four. They get 4 inputs for $475. So for a little more than $100 per input, this device is much less expensive in the long run as compared to buying panel meters. Because in this case, if the customer wanted to add 4 more inputs and they were using panel meters, there would be 4 new panel meters. And that's going to be a lot more money than even a base unit consolidator. So this is one thing I wanted to add about pricing while we're on the subject. And lastly, we're going to take a look at the slide that just says, we have this configurator available. It's actually really useful. So you can go to the Precision Digital website, and right on the home page, there's going to be a nice picture of the Consolidator Plus. When you click on that, it'll bring you to a products page, and you can use this configurator on the side here to fill in, how many I/O you need, all that type of stuff, and it will spit out a model number for you. But as it says in that highlighted section there, be warned, even though a part number doesn't pop up on the configurator or isn't on the website, doesn't mean it's not possible. So what do I mean by that? Well, I did the math. I forget the number. I did the math. It was over 1 million. It was over 1 million different possibilities, I think, for the different combinations of cards you can have and I/Os and all that. And so that's just a lot of numbers. So what we did was we took the basics of it, what we thought people would buy, the configurations people would buy, and that's what's on the website. So that's a long way of saying there are other part numbers that can be built. They're technically custom part numbers, but we can build pretty much anything. So if you go on the website and you're looking for a particular model with a particular I/O setup and you don't see it, that doesn't mean it's not available. That just means give me a call and I'll help you work through it. And so with that, that's the end of our class. It's 4:25, and so like I said from the beginning, I'm not going to ask for any more than 30 minutes of your time. And so I hope you all enjoyed this week's class. Before we go, I just want to mention that, let's see, this week was gas section. Next week, we're going to go over miscellaneous applications, or I like to say honorable mentions. So just common applications that you see out there in the world that we haven't gone over, mostly just because I couldn't fill a half-hour section on just temperature applications, really. And then we're also going to be having a midterm exam in the next couple weeks. So you can look forward to that. I promise you it's not too hard. It'll be fun. And that'll be all. So I'm going to start looking through questions. At this point, if you want to go, you can feel free to leave. Or if you want to hear me answer some questions, that's okay too. First question is, earlier it was stated that there could only be 8 items per screen. You have 9 on the common alarm screen. Well, that's interesting. Let me take a look. I promise I'm not lying. Well, let's take a look at what that screen looks like again. So here's my demo. Let's go to real. All right. And so you thought there was 9 objects on here, and I can see why you thought that. And so this bar graph and this channel, that's one object because that comes from a channel. This propane alarm, that I consider an object. All that is that's the relay. I think it's the relay information. Like I literally just added the relay to this. So that's all that is. So basically what we have here are 5 objects. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The bar graphs combined with this channel is going to be 1 object. So thank you for that question. I probably should have clarified that way earlier on when we're talking about the objects being on the screen. Okay. We have another question that says, what if more than 1 channel is in alarm? That is a great question. So what happens if more than 1 channel is an alarm? Well, let's take a look. Since we're already on that screen, let's just take a look at what happens. So my channel 1 is going to go to alarm. And I'm going to make my channel 2 go into an alarm. Now, on this particular screen with this particular setup, nothing special happens except we see that both channels are causing an alarm. Now, in real life, what could happen is I can make this alarm, these warning alarms, I could tie that to its own relay so that you have 1 relay for an entire zone. But in this case, if both channels are in alarm at the same time, nothing special happens. I'd be curious to know if that answers your question or what you were exactly getting at with that. It was a very interesting question. We have another question that says, how many I/O fit in a basic consolidator? Awesome question. Awesome question. So that really that map, let's see, that is determined by which I/O you want. So what I mean by that is the Consolidator Plus on the back of the unit has 7 slots. A slot can accept an I/O card. And so I'm actually going to take a look back here. So if you look at the screen here, the input cards, so these ones here, they have 4 inputs. The output cards have 5. So if we wanted to fill a Consolidator Plus with nothing but 4 to 20 input cards, we have 7 slots, 4 inputs per. We have a maximum of 28 inputs on the Consolidator Plus for 4 to 20. Again, that's not just inputs. We also have the 24-volt power supplies that are on each input. So you get 28 inputs, 28 power supplies. Now, let's say you took a base model, okay, because you're only going to be using Modbus. You don't care about 4 to 20 inputs. So we have a base model, and we want to fill that entire thing with relays. Well, for one reason or another, slot number 1 cannot be relays. So that leaves us with 6 slots available. All right? So 6 slots or 6 cards, 5 outputs per card. So that gives us 30 outputs. So we can have 30 relay outputs from this device as a maximum. And so the answer to that question really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But it's a lot. It's between 20 and 30 is usually what I tell folks. So that was another really great question. And I believe that gets, I go into detail on that in the study guide from this week as well. All right, you guys, another question. Keep them coming, guys. A plant has 3 detectors and 3 entryways. They want alarm lights set. Can you verify that this unit can be programmed to set off all 3 lights for any one of the detectors going into alarm? I won't confirm that right now, this second, because before I give you an answer on that, I would want to test it out on my unit and see it working. So what I can do for you is I have your name and email. So what I'm going to do is after this, I can look at the demo unit and try to make it work. I think the answer is yes. I don't see why we couldn't do that, but let me just double check for you before I start lying. And I think that's all the questions we have, I believe. And if there are any that I missed, I apologize. I will look through this after and address any questions that I may have missed. That's all the time we have today. So it's 4:32. I really appreciate you folks, first of all, signing on early, and second of all, staying for the entire time with the Q&A section. I think we have a lot of good conversations, and a lot of great questions have been coming from these Q&A sessions. So I really appreciate the folks who are asking questions and being engaged with us. So again, we're going to see you next week, and we're going to take a look at miscellaneous applications, or the nice to mention applications. So I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and stay safe.